Maya always kept to herself. A bookish young woman in her late 20s, she had no close friends, no family she spoke of, and her days were spent tucked away in the small attic room she rented in Mrs. Eberly's boarding house. For months, the other tenants barely noticed her presence, except for the soft tapping of her typewriter late at night. It wasn't until the morning that Mrs. Eberly found the bloodied claw marks on her bedroom door that they began to wonder about their quiet, unassuming tenant upstairs. The house was an old Victorian relic at the edge of town, rumored to have its own share of ghostly tales. Maya had moved in 6 months ago, paying her rent in cash and never letting anyone see her room. Her behavior wasn't odd enough to raise suspicion until strange things began to happen. It started small. At night, whispers in a language no one understood seemed to echo through the walls. Doors locked themselves. Lights flickered, dimming without explanation. The tenants dismissed it as the quirks of an old house until Maya began to change. Her once timid demeanor became unnerving. She would sit at the dining table, staring at the others with unblinking eyes, not saying a word. She stopped eating, and her frail body seemed to grow even thinner. Dark circles painted her face, and her nails, once neatly trimmed, became cracked and sharp. Mrs. Eberly, curious about her tenant's growing strangeness, climbed to Maya's attic one night. The door, locked from the inside, refused to budge. But through the keyhole, she glimpsed something that froze her blood, a room filled with arcane symbols painted in red, and Maya crouched on the floor, whispering to the shadows. As the days passed, the boarding house turned darker, both in atmosphere and spirit. The other tenants began hearing Maya's typewriter at odd hours, even when the attic door remained locked. But when they checked, her room would be eerily silent, the typewriter untouched. One night, Todd, the college student renting the room below Maya, awoke to the sound of scratching above his ceiling. He grabbed a flashlight and decided to investigate. As he climbed the narrow staircase, the air grew colder. When he reached her door, it swung open before he could knock. Maya stood in the center of the room, her head tilted unnaturally to one side. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she turned, her hollow eyes locking on Todd. "They're listening," she whispered, her voice layered with tones that didn't belong to her. Todd stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. From that moment, the other tenants avoided Maya completely. But the house wouldn't let them leave, front doors wouldn't open, phones were dead, and time seemed to stretch endlessly. Mrs. Eberly finally confronted Maya, demanding answers. Maya's voice was barely a whisper as she said, "I didn't invite it here, it chose me." That night, the house trembled. Tenants awoke to a deafening silence, followed by the sound of Maya's laughter that didn't belong to her. It echoed through the house, shaking the walls. They rushed to the attic to find Maya standing in the center of a circle of salt and blood, her body contorted as if pulled by invisible strings. Her head snapped toward them unnaturally, and her lips moved to form a smile that stretched too wide. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed. The lights flickered, and shadows began crawling toward them from every corner of the room. Mrs. Eberly, clutching an old crucifix, screamed for everyone to leave. But Maya, or what was left of her, laughed again, stepping out of the protective circle. "It's not her anymore," said a voice from the darkness. Suddenly, Todd spotted an old book on Maya's desk, its pages filled with strange incantations. It was written in her handwriting, but with symbols none of them understood. "The book," Todd yelled, grabbing it. As he tore the pages, Maya collapsed, screaming in agony. But before they could celebrate their escape, the shadows surged forward. "It's not over," the voice growled. By morning, Maya was gone. Her room was empty, as if she had never been there. The salt circle remained, though the symbols painted in blood had faded. The tenants left the house one by one, vowing never to return. Mrs. Eberly sold the property to a demolition company. Yet, when the wrecking crew arrived, the house was gone. Nothing but a patch of scorched earth remained. Todd kept the book, its pages burned beyond recognition, but sometimes, late at night, he swore he could hear the faint tapping of a typewriter echoing in his room. The last thing Todd ever heard was Maya's voice whispering from the shadows, "I told you they were listening."